So you may have heard this phrase before where someone has said the church is like a family or my church family and I'm a part of a church family. And this kind of gives this connotation that people are connected, people know each other, people are invested in one another's lives. But doesn't it sometimes feel like that, like ideology of what that can be just feels a little out of reach? Like friendly, yeah, but family, that seems like when I think of it, it seems to be a little bit far out of reach. You know what I mean by that? It's like we want to be known. We want people to know us. We want people to have our backs. We want to know some people are standing with us in seasons of life. And yet, while we see the world is more connected than it's ever been, it's also not as close as it once was. So we did something different. We've been reading this book, and the staff went through this book and video series by Jeannie Allen about finding your people. And so we've tried the series a little bit different. So I've spoke a little bit, and Mark spoke a little bit, and Antonio spoke a little bit, and we've kind of put it together to kind of look at this. And it's addressing this very thing that finding our community, finding our people is actually a struggle. It's a struggle. We all have acquaintances. People will go, hey, how are you? Hey, what's up, buddy? How are you? Great. And we all have really close people, but it's that place in the middle that we really try to focus on. And I get it. Like church, when we talk about church as family, coming to church and being a part of church, that initial step towards church is hard. You ever thought about this? Like we think about this way all the time. In fact, next week, don't miss next week, because I'm going to talk about like why GatheringPoint does church the way that we do church, because it's different than some of the other churches and kind of the why and why we do what we do. But we look at it, sometimes I think about it like this. For you inviting some of your unchurched or non-churched or de-church friends to church, it's kind of like inviting your non-sushi friends to try sushi, right? How many of you are sushi people? Raise your hand. How many of you are non-sushi people? Raise your hand. How many are indifferent on the topic? Yeah. So this is just an analogy, so I don't need an email from like the sushi lovers to be like, oh, I can't believe you said, okay, whatever, okay? But seriously, I view this, isn't it true? Like some of your non-church friends, it's like inviting your non-sushi friends to try sushi, and you're like, you should try sushi, you'd love it. And they look at you and go, and you're like, well, have you tried it before? And, you know, I've asked, somebody said, have you tried it before? I was like, yeah, I tried it. I used to teach speech, and years ago I was teaching in the communications department at Olivet, and I was an adjunct there and taught speech, and somebody did a how-to speech on how to make sushi, and they made sushi right there in class, and then we had to try it. And then, isn't it true, they go, oh, well, that's not sushi, you didn't have it right. If you had it the right way, then you would really like it. And isn't that true? That's how you viewed some of your non-church friends. You're like, oh, you tried there? Oh, well, you probably wouldn't like it. If you tried this brand, though. And I'm like, I don't think so. The closest ocean's like 900 miles from here. And anything that, you know, like, well, if you tried gas station sushi, like, those words shouldn't even be together. And that's how your unchurched people view church. Isn't that true? You're trying to explain to them, but you just got to try it. I love it. And they're looking at you like, I don't care what you say. I'm not doing sushi. It's not happening. Isn't it raw fish? Yeah, but you don't understand. And so when we do things here and why we do that, we understand that you have people in your life that you're trying to connect with, and you want to connect them to the greatest thing that you've ever experienced and that you've been a part of. And they're looking at you going, I don't care what you say. I'm not trying sushi. It ain't happened. So I want to look at this in the context of friends, and next week we'll kind of explain why we do what we do and why we're doing the ways that we do stuff. But in 2015, as we look at connection and the people around us, 2015, Google did a big study. And they call their employees Googlers, right? And so they're not employees, you're a Googler. And so they did a huge study. They were trying to find out what makes their employees best performers. Of their best performing employees, what are the things about Google that makes their best employers, their highest performers, become their highest employers? And there were 5 key factors that emerged as they surveyed them and they looked at them. There were 5, and there was things that popped up like dependability was something that was a key value, and clarity, the people that understood their job and knew how they could win at their job. And when they had clear descriptions and clear job descriptions, those people performed better than those who were unclear about the work that they do. None of that was surprising. The number one thing that they found that increased highest performing teams at Google and the highest performing employees at Google was psychological safety. And they were stunned. They did not see that coming at all. Teams that felt safe, employees that felt safe to be vulnerable in their team meetings, to be vulnerable and share ideas and be creative, that they were able to take risks and offer their ideas and share their ideas, and they were heard and they were valued. They weren't afraid of being judged. Those teams where you were on a team and you weren't afraid of being judged by your ideas, and you weren't afraid of taking the blame when something went bad, and you felt like you could speak up and be real with other people without there being like judgment and those kinds of things. Those teams, those employees far outperformed the other employees there. And studies have shown that psychological safety creates space for people to be more creative, for their voice to voice their ideas, share their ideas, come up with ideas, and challenge other ideas without fear. It encourages people. Those teams experience breakthroughs, innovations at levels that all the other teams didn't even come close to. And at the expense of this sounding like a business lecture or an employee lecture, hang in there, because here's what matters of this, is this concept of psychological safety applies to our relationships. It applies to how you and I find community. Now, I get it. For some of you, this is why you're struggling in your job right now. You don't feel safe. Just your ideas. It's not like you're physically, I hope it's not a physical issue. If it is a physical issue, you need to quit. But if it's a psychological thing, you need to, there's a reason that you feel disconnected. And there's something that there is. And so when we look at this, when we start talking about psychological safety, this is a place where I feel like I can be fully known and I can be fully loved. And I'm not afraid of rejection and judgment. I can take feedback. I can listen to feedback. And what we find when we look at not just the report Google did, but when we go and look at Scripture and we look at the things that you struggle with, the things that I struggle with, the areas we get hung up on, we realize that you and I were both made for connection. And when we don't have that, there's things in our life that begin to show up. So what does it look like for us to find our people? And more importantly, how do you become the kind of person someone else is looking for? And so we're going to look at that. And so like we've said, we've been more connected than ever thanks to tech, but we're also more disconnected than ever thanks to tech. We're also, all the data across the board says we're all lonelier than we've ever been. Even though we're more connected, we're seeing what more people are doing, and we're more connected both with automobiles kind of thing and transportation than we've ever been in the history of the world. But we have less real friendships, less deeper connections than we've ever had. And we still have the same needs. We have the need for love, we have the need for acceptance and belonging, and the need for connection. And we've heard it said, we've said it here in the last couple weeks here, somebody said it takes a village to raise a child, but you also need your village to thrive as a human. And when we don't have that, we feel lonely and isolated and disconnected. Have you noticed, I don't know, I've noticed this around here at GatheringPoint. I don't know if you've noticed this in your home or in your workplace or, the places that you hang out, but have you noticed something? People are starting to get a little funky right now in our community. I think it's because it's been so stinking cold. I'm being serious. We've been, at 1 for 2 weeks or something? It was like a high. We're like, oh, what's the high today? 2. What's the feels like? Don't look at that number. And you find this, and I think people are so isolated because you can't get out. We can't get out, or if you get out, you're cranky, right? Because you have to bundle up to levels that aren't right. And so you can't walk your dog, and you're not able to walk your dog. And that helps you, getting out, seeing people, walking your dog, does that. And I'm going to walk my dog, probably later today. I'm going to take her out. And she's a little bit crazy, friendly, a little bit crazy. It's a lot like your first girlfriend was. A little friendly, a little crazy. I'm probably going to not say that next service. I'm going to look the opposite direction of my wife right now, yeah. Some of you, I feel bad if you married your high school sweetheart. Well, sorry. But that's my dog, so we're going to take her out a little bit later, and and get there. And we're going to go there because we have to figure out how can we get outside and how can we begin to connect with people and how do we build authentic relationship, because what we learn when it's 2 degrees, when it's 1 degree, and you have to stay inside and you're not going out and you're not seeing people, is that you can't do your life alone. That's not an idea that I have. That's a biblical truth that we're going to explore today. Sometimes the hardest part is figuring how to live that out. We all know that's true, but how do we live that out? And so today I want to talk about this, and we're going to look at some of the things that we see in the New Testament as it pertains to this. And so because in the Bible, all throughout the Bible, from the start of the Bible all the way to the end of the Bible, community is a biblical priority. When people are alone, problems begin to start rising up. And it starts, when we look at this, we have this biblical priority that starts in Acts. Acts chapter 2, we have this formation of the church. And the church is different than Judaism, although there's some things that are similar about it. But there was this snapshot of the early church, and they had this thing called community, and it's the benchmark for which you and I should ascribe to for biblical community. And this is what it said, these early Christians, how they built community, how the church became family to one another. And listen how they describe this. They, the early believers, the early church, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. So they would gather together, they'd listen, they'd read the letters of what the apostles had said. They would go and retell the stories of Jesus. They would read Paul's letters, the same things that we do here. They would read them, and then they would have fellowship, and they would break bread together. They would share a meal with one another and pray. Everyone that was gathered in those gatherings, they felt like family. They were filled with awe at the many signs and wonders, all the wonders and signs performed by the apostles. And the believers, they just didn't stop there. The believers were together and they had everything in common. Now, this does not mean they all liked sushi or they all ran marathons or they all, did all those kinds of things or they all cheered for the Cubs, although that would make sense, but they don't. They had everything in common. They sold their possessions and gave to anyone in that community who had need so that no one was without. And every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who are being served, because the value of the local church is that you belong. In spite of what you've done, in spite of your sin, in spite of your behavior that you're not proud of, they added to the number of people who were being saved because you belong, because you're a part of a community and you're a part of a deep sacrificial community of people that are paddling together in the same direction. Here's the twist. That's just not a past idea. That's just not a non-tech first century concept. This design, the way that we were designed, applies to us today. And this is what God has wanted for his church every generation after generation after generation, including ours. Because community is vulnerable and honest. And I get it. The brochure for it sounds great. Who wouldn't want that? The problem is, it's really hard to find, isn't it? It's really hard to be a part of. I mean, I feel like it's the thing we constantly feel like we're searching for. Because I think the reason is because true community is really messy. Some people are weird. You get close to them, you know what I'm talking about. You get close to some people and they start talking and you're like, can't do it. Can't do it. I want to, and let's face it, messiness and weirdness are things we try to avoid. We don't have time for that. It just gets awkward. And so what we do is you and I will put on a polished version of ourselves where everything's right, everything looks good. It's the Instagram version where all the blemishes are taking off. But community asks for vulnerability. It calls for acceptance of the things that we try to avoid. And I want you to hear this. You can't find your people until you're willing to be seen, like really seen. And here's the problem. Many of you don't want to be seen, and you answer questions when people ask you with this, I'm fine. I'm fine. Are you? No, everything's great. Everything's great. And that's a facade. Some things may be great. I'm sure some things are great in your life. Some things are good in your life, and some things in your life are fine. But most likely there's also probably an area that's not. And the church is called to carry one another's burdens, and you can't do that unless you know what the burdens are. And you won't do that unless you're close enough to someone to see them. The Apostle Paul writes this in Galatians. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, he says, this is a call to the churches. He is encouraging the church into Galatia because they were attending, but they weren't connecting. And he says, carry one another's burdens. And in this way, you'll fulfill the law of Christ. What's the law of Christ? To love your neighbor as yourself. Because real community doesn't mean just walking next to someone. It means walking with someone through the good and the bad and the ugly and the weird. And the reason is because you were created for connection. You were designed for connection. Now, when we look at this, from the very beginning, God created Adam, and the first thing he instructs Adam to say in Genesis, all the way back at the beginning, is, it's not good. It's really not good for men to be alone. It's really not good when women are all alone. It's really not good for human beings. He created them. Everything was good. He created oceans and mountains and planets and galaxies, the sun, stars, all this. And everything it was good. And then he creates man and goes, well, that ain't good. That ain't going to work. It's not good when we're alone. We're designed for relationship, and not just relationship with God, but with each other. And when we don't have that, something feels off. Something inside of us says there's just something wrong. There's a gnawing that takes place inside of us. I mean, you know when you're hungry, right? Your body sends you signals when you're hungry. Your body also sends signals when you're lonely and disconnected. Your soul sends you a signal. It's God's way of saying, it's not good for you to be alone right now. And you're alone. That's why finding your community is so important, because when you don't find it, you feel the weight of it. You live with the weight of it. There's a stress to it. And the good news is God already has provided an answer for it. And it's just church, his body of Christ, a family where you can be known and cared for and loved. And you're already in it, but some of you haven't embraced it and walked towards it. And it's up to you, and I hate to say this, but it's up to you to build the relationships that make you feel like family, and that requires vulnerability. Because you have to be the community you need. You have to build your community that you need. And you have to be the person that someone else is looking for. And we all sit around, if we all, start shopping for the perfect community to fall into our lap, it won't happen. It's not going to happen. Well, nobody talked to me. Did you try to talk to anybody? No. They should come to me. Folks, that ain't going to happen. If that's your attitude's probably sour, which means your face is sour, which means nobody's going to talk to you. Because the brochure for you is, nobody's walking up to that. We got enough of that in our life already. You have to be the person that helps others connect. So that what Paul says to the Romans, he says this, be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourselves. In other words, community isn't just about waiting for someone to reach out to you. It's about you reaching out first. And community isn't something you find. Community is something you build. And I get it. Some of you are tired. You've tried. You built. And then that person moved. And that person left. And that person didn't seem to be the person that you thought they were. And so this is where isolation really kicks into overdrive, is because we go, I tried that. So what do? You have to invite someone else into your life again. Start a conversation. Have a cup of coffee. And you might be surprised how God can take a group of people and quickly turn them into real meaningful community. I love the story of the guy who started New York Life Insurance Company. He built New York Life Insurance Company he would have lunch every day. He committed to have lunch every day with 3 people that didn't know each other, but he thought should know each other. So every lunch, he would go around New York City and he would invite 3 people to lunch. He would try to find a banker, a builder, and somebody that has an entrepreneurial idea. And he would have lunch with them, and they would start having lunch together, and they would start talking about, all these things. And inevitably, these people, you get a banker, a builder, and an entrepreneur together, and they, what happens? Things happen. And the guy who started New York Life Insurance, he never once tried to sell an insurance policy. What happens to those 3 people when they start building whatever they start building? Where do they go get their insurance from? The guy that picked up the lunch tab. How did he create this empire? He did it by just having lunch with people who he thought should be together. So what do? You start by just inviting people, because God uses community to help us grow. Now here's the thing you don't know about. Here at Gathering Point, we have right about 100 people who have been preparing and training to be spiritual mentors, one-on-one friends, to talk and walk through life with people, the kind of mentors who can help you grow in your faith, the kind of people that you can just connect with. Because I know some of you go into a group is like, I ain't doing that. No. We'll hit more on that in a few months, but those are things that we're coming. In fact, some of those this week, they're practicing, having these conversations on how to do this, because here's what I don't need and here's what you don't need. I don't need another conversation in my life about the weather. I'm good. All those slots are taken. I don't need another conversation in my life to talk about the Bears. I know where we are in the cycle. We hired a new coach. We're just a couple seasons away from a new first-round draft pick, and then a quarterback, then an offensive coordinator, and then a new coach. I know that. I know where we're at. I don't need another conversation about that. But to have somebody who cares and is invested in my soul and who I am as a person, is someone who can help me grow in my faith, because we've got to allow for some people in our lives to get close. Here's the catch. It takes courage. But we fear being known, and we're afraid of rejection, and we're afraid of being misunderstood and judgment, and so we keep people as arm's length, and as long as we do that, we'll never experience true connection, the kind of love and friendship that changes our lives and allows people to come close to us. So the life that is long for us is, 1 John talks about this in chapter 1, verse 4, 1 John 4. He says, there's just no fear in love. And so many of us have fear to be loved or to give love because of our past experiences. But the perfect love that comes through God and through the people of God is a perfect kind of love, and that love drives out fears. It lowers our inability to connect with other people. It allows us to be vulnerable. But we have to be intentional for this. So let's take our first step of community as a process of how God can change our life. Because even back in the Old Testament, hundreds of years before Paul wrote some of these things in the New Testament, the Proverbs wrote it like this way. They said, human beings, it's like iron. When you're with somebody else who's good, iron sharpens iron. You and I get better. Our lives get sharper and clearer and more valuable when another person around us challenges us. Not as challenging to us, but challenges us and pushes us. There's a phrase, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And the same thing is true in your faith. We weren't meant to grow alone. God uses relationships to refine us, to challenge us, to help us see things in ourselves and in others and in circumstances that we wouldn't see on our own. And sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do right now, especially as we close out February, although February seems like it's been 3 months long, and it's the shortest month, but I don't believe that, is to open your life up to other people. And so today we're going to close out, and we're going to close the service the way we do each and every week with response stations. And today maybe you're just in a dark spot. Maybe the ability that you've been stuck in your house for forever because it's been in the single digits. You're like, man, I just need light. It's just gotten dark. and I haven't been seeing myself correctly, and I haven't been seeing others correctly, and I'm not in a good spot right now. Maybe today you just need to light a candle and go, Jesus, I need your light like I need sunshine to begin to shine through me. Maybe today you want to write a prayer request and you want to pin it to the cross, and we want to go through there, and that's fine. Others of you want to take communion and you want to do what the first century church did and just break bread with one another around you. And I get it. Some of you are still reluctant and even have a little bit of fear to do that, and that's okay. And then some of you today, I think it's great, the World Vision thing, I think it's really, really good, because some of you, it's true, Mark said it, and I've seen it happen, where sometimes those who step out to run the marathon, and I know there's you get blisters and all this kind of stuff. I've heard the stories. That's not good for the brochure. I'm just telling you it's not. But these people find people, and they connect with them, and they struggle with them. And they push each other. It's where iron sharpens iron. It's where that verse really makes sense. And maybe today you're going to write a prayer request. Maybe you're going to light a candle. Maybe you're going to take communion. Or maybe you're just going to come over here at the end of the service and go, like so many others have said, I'm not a runner, but I need people. I need people in my life. I need some iron to sharpen iron. And for that would be worth your time today. And then don't miss out next week as we talk about explaining Gathering Point and why Gathering Point does church the way that it does church, and for the purpose of your friends and for your neighbors. So can I pray with you this morning? Father, today, as we close out this service, we want to sing a song to you, songs about you, and we want to respond. We want to become the kind of people that we need in our community. We want to be aware of who we are so that we can invite and be vulnerable with some people. And some of us, it's going to be as simple as going out for coffee, and others of us are going to sign up to do something completely intimidating, like running a marathon. And it's in your name we pray, Lord. Would you help us today to allow your perfect love to cast out fear that may be keeping us isolated? We love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us this week. If this was your first time, we'd love to invite you to text the word GP guest to the number 97000. It was great having you with us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.